Lesson 32. Shopping made easy. People are not so honest as they once were. The temptation to steal is greater than ever before, especially in large shops. A detective recently watched a well-dressed woman who always went into a large store on Monday mornings. One Monday, there were fewer people in the shop than usual when the woman came in, so it was easier for the detective to watch her. The woman first bought a few small articles. After a little time, she chose one of the most expensive dresses in the shop and handed it to an assistant who wrapped it up for her as quickly as possible. Then the woman simply took the parcel and walked out of the shop without paying. When she was arrested, the detective found out that the shop assistant was her daughter. The girl gave her mother a free dress once a week. Lesson 33. Out of the darkness. Nearly a week passed before the girl was able to explain what had happened to her. One afternoon, she set out from the coast in a small boat and was caught in a storm. Towards evening, the boat struck a rock and the girl jumped into the sea. Then she swam to the shore after spending the whole night in the water. During that time, she covered a distance of 8 miles. Early next morning, she saw a light ahead. She knew she was near the shore because the light was high up on the cliffs. On arriving at the shore, the girl struggled up the cliff towards the light she had seen. That was all she remembered. When she woke up a day later, she found herself in hospital. Lesson 34. Quick work. Dan Robinson has been worried all week. Last Tuesday, he received a letter from the local police. In the letter, he was asked to call at the station. Dan wondered why he was wanted by the police, but he went to the station yesterday, and now he is not worried anymore. At the station, he was told by a smiling policeman that his bicycle had been found. 5 days ago, the policeman told him, the bicycle was picked up in a small village 400 miles away. It is now being sent to his home by train. Dan was most surprised when he heard the news. He was amused, too, because he never expected the bicycle to be found. It was stolen 20 years ago when Dan was a boy of 15. Lesson 35. Stop, thief. Roy Trenton used to drive a taxi. A short while ago, however, he became a bus driver and he has not regretted it. He is finding his new work far more exciting. When he was driving along Catford Street recently, he saw 2 thieves rush out of a shop and run towards a waiting car. One of them was carrying a bag full of money. Roy acted quickly and drove the bus straight at the thieves. The one with the money got such a fright that he dropped the bag. As the thieves were trying to get away in their car, Roy drove his bus into the back of it. While the battered car was moving away, Roy stopped his bus and telephoned the police. The thief's car was badly damaged and easy to recognize. Shortly afterwards, the police stopped the car and both men were arrested. Lesson 36. Across the Channel. Debbie Hart is going to swim across the English Channel tomorrow. She is going to set out from the French coast at 5 o'clock in the morning. Debbie is only 11 years old and she hopes to set up a new world record. She is a strong swimmer and many people feel that she is sure to succeed. Debbie's father will set out with her in a small boat. Mr. Hart has trained his daughter for years. Tomorrow, he will be watching her anxiously as she swims the long distance to England. Debbie intends to take short rests every 2 hours. She will have something to drink, but she will not eat any solid food. Most of Debbie's school friends will be waiting for her on the English coast. Among them will be Debbie's mother, who swam the channel herself when she was a girl. Lesson 37. The Olympic Games. The Olympic Games will be held in our country in 4 years' time. As a great many people will be visiting the country, the government will be building new hotels, an immense stadium, and a new Olympic standard swimming pool. They will also be building new roads and a special railway line. The games will be held just outside the capital, and the whole area will be called Olympic City. Workers will have completed the new roads by the end of this year. By the end of next year, they will have finished work on the new stadium. The fantastic modern buildings have been designed by Kurt Gunter. Everybody will be watching anxiously as the new buildings go up. We are all very excited and are looking forward to the Olympic Games because they have never been held before in this country. Lesson 38. Everything except the weather. My old friend Harrison had lived in the Mediterranean for many years before he returned to England. He had often dreamed of retiring in England and had planned to settle down in the country. He had no sooner returned than he bought a house and went to live there. Almost immediately he began to complain about the weather, for even though it was still summer, it rained continually and it was often bitterly cold. After so many years of sunshine, Harrison got a shock. He acted as if he had never lived in England before. In the end, it was more than he could bear. He had hardly had time to settle down when he sold the house and left the country. The dream he had had for so many years ended there. Harrison had thought of everything except the weather. Lesson 39. Am I all right? While John Gilbert was in hospital, he asked his doctor to tell him whether his operation had been successful, but the doctor refused to do so. The following day, the patient asked for a bedside telephone. When he was alone, he telephoned the hospital exchange and asked for Dr. Millington. When the doctor answered the phone, Mr. Gilbert said he was inquiring about a certain patient, a Mr. John Gilbert. He asked if Mr. Gilbert's operation had been successful, and the doctor told him that it had been. He then asked when Mr. Gilbert would be allowed to go home, and the doctor told him that he would have to stay in hospital for another 2 weeks. Then Dr. Millington asked the caller if he was a relative of the patient. "No," the patient answered. "I am Mr. John Gilbert." Lesson 40. Food and Talk. Last week at a dinner party, the hostess asked me to sit next to Mrs. Rumbold. Mrs. Rumbold was a large, unsmiling lady in a tight black dress. She did not even look up when I took my seat beside her. Her eyes were fixed on her plate, and in a short time, she was busy eating. I tried to make conversation. "A new play is coming to the Globe soon," I said. "Will you be seeing it?" "No," she answered. "Will you be spending your holidays abroad this year?" I asked. "No," she answered. "Will you be staying in England?" I asked. "No," she answered. In despair, I asked her whether she was enjoying her dinner. "Young man," she answered, "if you ate more and talked less, we would both enjoy our dinner." Lesson 41. Do you call that a hat? "Do you call that a hat?" I said to my wife. "You needn't be so rude about it," my wife answered as she looked at herself in the mirror. I sat down on one of those modern chairs with holes in it and waited. We had been in the hat shop for half an hour, and my wife was still in front of the mirror. "We mustn't buy things we don't need," I remarked suddenly. I regretted saying it almost at once. "You needn't have said that," my wife answered. "I needn't remind you of that terrible tie you bought yesterday." "I find it beautiful," I said. "A man can never have too many ties." "And a woman can't have too many hats," she answered. 10 minutes later, we walked out of the shop together. My wife was wearing a hat that looked like a lighthouse. Lesson 42. Not very musical. As we had had a long walk through one of the markets of Old Delhi, we stopped at a square to have a rest. After a time, we noticed a snake charmer with 2 large baskets at the other side of the square, so we went to have a look at him. As soon as he saw us, he picked up a long pipe which was covered with coins and opened one of the baskets. When he began to play a tune, we had our first glimpse of the snake. It rose out of the basket and began to follow the movements of the pipe. We were very much surprised when the snake charmer suddenly began to play jazz and modern pop songs. The snake, however, continued to dance slowly. It obviously could not tell the difference between Indian music and jazz. Lesson 43. Over the South Pole. In 1929, 3 years after his flight over the North Pole, the American explorer R.E. Byrd successfully flew over the South Pole for the first time. Though at first, Byrd and his men were able to take a great many photographs of the mountains that lay below, they soon ran into serious trouble. At one point, it seemed certain that their plane would crash. It could only get over the mountains if it rose to 10,000 feet. Byrd at once ordered his men to throw out 2 heavy food sacks. The plane was then able to rise, and it cleared the mountains by 400 feet. Byrd now knew that he would be able to reach the South Pole, which was 300 miles away, for there were no more mountains in sight. The aircraft was able to fly over the endless white plains without difficulty. Lesson 44. Through the Forest. Mrs. Ann Sterling did not think of the risk she was taking when she ran through a forest after 2 men. They had rushed up to her while she was having a picnic at the edge of a forest with her children, and tried to steal her handbag. In the struggle, the strap broke and, with the bag in their possession, both men started running through the trees. Mrs. Sterling got so angry that she ran after them. She was soon out of breath, but she continued to run. When she caught up with them, she saw that they had sat down and were going through the contents of the bag, so she ran straight at them. The men got such a fright that they dropped the bag and ran away. "The strap needs mending," said Mrs. Sterling later, but they did not steal anything. Lesson 45. A Clear Conscience. The whole village soon learnt that a large sum of money had been lost. Sam Benton, the local butcher, had lost his wallet while taking his savings to the post office. Sam was sure that the wallet must have been found by one of the villagers, but it was not returned to him. 3 months passed, and then one morning, Sam found his wallet outside his front door. It had been wrapped up in newspaper, and it contained half the money he had lost, together with a note which said, "A thief, yes, but only 50% a thief." 2 months later, some more money was sent to Sam with another note. Only 25% a thief now. In time, all Sam's money was paid back in this way. The last note said, "I am 100% honest now." Lesson 46. Expensive and uncomfortable. When a plane from London arrived at Sydney Airport, workers began to unload a number of wooden boxes which contained clothing. No one could account for the fact that one of the boxes was extremely heavy. It suddenly occurred to one of the workers to open up the box. He was astonished at what he found. A man was lying in the box on top of a pile of woolen goods. He was so surprised at being discovered that he did not even try to run away. After he was arrested, the man admitted hiding in the box before the plane left London. He had had a long and uncomfortable trip, for he had been confined to the wooden box for over 18 hours. The man was ordered to pay £3,500 for the cost of the trip. The normal price of a ticket is £2,000. Lesson 47. A Thirsty Ghost. A public house which was recently bought by Mr. Ian Thompson is up for sale. Mr. Thompson is going to sell it because it is haunted. He told me that he could not go to sleep one night because he heard a strange noise coming from the bar. The next morning, he found that the doors had been blocked by chairs and the furniture had been moved. Though Mr. Thompson had turned the lights off before he went to bed, they were on in the morning. He also said that he had found 5 empty whiskey bottles which the ghost must have drunk the night before. When I suggested that some villagers must have come in for a free drink, Mr. Thompson shook his head. The villagers have told him that they will not accept the pub even if he gives it away. Lesson 48. Did you want to tell me something? Dentists always ask questions when it is impossible for you to answer. My dentist had just pulled out one of my teeth and had told me to rest for a while. I tried to say something, but my mouth was full of cotton wool. He knew I collected matchboxes and asked me whether my collection was growing. He then asked me how my brother was and whether I liked my new job in London. In answer to these questions, I either nodded or made strange noises. Meanwhile, my tongue was busy searching out the hole where the tooth had been. I suddenly felt very worried, but could not say anything. When the dentist at last removed the cotton wool from my mouth, I was able to tell him that he had pulled out the wrong tooth. Lesson 49. The End of a Dream. Tired of sleeping on the floor, a young man in Tehran saved up for years to buy a real bed. For the first time in his life, he became the proud owner of a bed which had springs and a mattress. Because the weather was very hot, he carried the bed onto the roof of his house. He slept very well for the first 2 nights, but on the 3rd night, a storm blew up. A gust of wind swept the bed off the roof and sent it crashing into the courtyard below. The young man did not wake up until the bed had struck the ground. Although the bed was smashed to pieces, the man was miraculously unhurt. When he woke up, he was still on the mattress. Glancing at the bits of wood and metal that lay around him, the man sadly picked up the mattress and carried it into his house. After he had put it on the floor, he promptly went to sleep again. Lesson 50. Taken for a ride. I love traveling in the country, but I don't like losing my way. I went on an excursion recently, but my trip took me longer than I expected. I'm going to Woodford Green, I said to the conductor as I got on the bus, but I don't know where it is. I'll tell you where to get off, answered the conductor. I sat in the front of the bus to get a good view of the countryside. After some time, the bus stopped. Looking round, I realized with a shock that I was the only passenger left on the bus. "You'll have to get off here," the conductor said. "This is as far as we go." "Is this Woodford Green?" I asked. "Oh dear," said the conductor suddenly. "I forgot to put you off." "It doesn't matter," I said. "I'll get off here." "We're going back now," said the conductor. "Well, in that case, I prefer to stay on the bus," I answered. Lesson 51. Reward for Virtue. My friend, Hugh, has always been fat, but things got so bad recently that he decided to go on a diet. He began his diet a week ago. First of all, he wrote out a long list of all the foods which were forbidden. The list included most of the things Hugh loves: butter, potatoes, rice, beer, milk, chocolate, and sweets. Yesterday I paid him a visit. I rang the bell and was not surprised to see that Hugh was still as fat as ever. He led me into his room and hurriedly hid a large parcel under his desk. It was obvious that he was very embarrassed. When I asked him what he was doing, he smiled guiltily and then put the parcel on the desk. He explained that his diet was so strict that he had to reward himself occasionally. Then he showed me the contents of the parcel. It contained 5 large bars of chocolate and 3 bags of sweets. Lesson 52. A pretty carpet. We have just moved into a new house, and I have been working hard all morning. I have been trying to get my new room in order. This has not been easy because I own over 1,000 books. To make matters worse, the room is rather small, so I have temporarily put my books on the floor. At the moment, they cover every inch of floor space, and I actually have to walk on them to get in or out of the room. A short while ago, my sister helped me to carry one of my old bookcases up the stairs. She went into my room and got a big surprise when she saw all those books on the floor. "This is the prettiest carpet I have ever seen," she said. She gazed at it for some time, then added, "You don't need bookcases at all. You can sit here in your spare time and read the carpet." Lesson 53. Hot Snake. At last, firemen have put out a big forest fire in California. Since then, they have been trying to find out how the fire began. Forest fires are often caused by broken glass or by cigarette ends which people carelessly throw away. Yesterday, the firemen examined the ground carefully, but were not able to find any broken glass. They were also quite sure that a cigarette end did not start the fire. This morning, however, a fireman accidentally discovered the cause. He noticed the remains of a snake which was wound round the electric wires of a 16,000-volt power line. In this way, he was able to solve the mystery. The explanation was simple but very unusual. A bird had snatched up the snake from the ground and then dropped it onto the wires. The snake then wound itself round the wires. When it did so, it sent sparks down to the ground, and these immediately started a fire. Lesson 54. Sticky Fingers. After breakfast, I sent the children to school, and then I went to the shops. It was still early when I returned home. The children were at school, my husband was at work, and the house was quiet. So I decided to make some meat pies. In a short time I was busy mixing butter and flour and my hands were soon covered with sticky pastry. At exactly that moment, the telephone rang. Nothing could have been more annoying. I picked up the receiver between two sticky fingers and was dismayed when I recognized the voice of Helen Bates. It took me 10 minutes to persuade her to ring back later. At last I hung up the receiver. What a mess! There was pastry on my fingers, on the telephone, and on the doorknobs. I had no sooner got back to the kitchen than the doorbell rang loud enough to wake the dead. This time it was the postman, and he wanted me to sign for a registered letter. Lesson 55. Not a gold mine. Dreams of finding lost treasure almost came true recently. A new machine called the Revealer has been invented, and it has been used to detect gold which has been buried in the ground. The machine was used in a cave near the seashore where, it is said, pirates used to hide gold. The pirates would often bury gold in the cave and then fail to collect it. Armed with the new machine, a search party went into the cave hoping to find buried treasure. The leader of the party was examining the soil near the entrance to the cave when the machine showed that there was gold under the ground. Very excited, the party dug a hole 2 feet deep. They finally found a small gold coin which was almost worthless. The party then searched the whole cave thoroughly, but did not find anything except an empty tin trunk. In spite of this, many people are confident that the Revealer may reveal something of value fairly soon. Lesson 56. Faster than sound. Once a year, a race is held for old cars. A lot of cars entered for this race last year, and there was a great deal of excitement just before it began. One of the most handsome cars was a Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost. The most unusual car was a Benz which had only 3 wheels. Built in 1885, it was the oldest car taking part. After a great many loud explosions, the race began. Many of the cars broke down on the course, and some drivers spent more time under their cars than in them. A few cars, however, completed the race. The winning car reached a speed of 40 miles an hour, much faster than any of its rivals. It sped downhill at the end of the race, and its driver had a lot of trouble trying to stop it. The race gave everyone a great deal of pleasure. It was very different from modern car races, but no less exciting. Lesson 57. Can I help you, madam? A woman in jeans stood at the window of an expensive shop. Though she hesitated for a moment, she finally went in and asked to see a dress that was in the window. The assistant who served her did not like the way she was dressed. Glancing at her scornfully, he told her that the dress was sold. The woman walked out of the shop angrily and decided to punish the assistant next day. She returned to the shop the following morning, dressed in a fur coat, with a handbag in one hand and a long umbrella in the other. After seeking out the rude assistant, she asked for the same dress. Not realizing who she was, the assistant was eager to serve her this time. With great difficulty, he climbed into the shop window to get the dress. As soon as she saw it, the woman said she did not like it. She enjoyed herself making the assistant bring almost everything in the window before finally buying the dress she had first asked for. Lesson 58. A blessing in disguise? The tiny village of Frinley is said to possess a cursed tree. Because the tree was mentioned in a newspaper, the number of visitors to Frinley has now increased. The tree was planted near the church 50 years ago, but it is only in recent years that it has gained an evil reputation. It is said that if anyone touches the tree, he will have bad luck. If he picks a leaf, he will die. Many villagers believe that the tree has already claimed a number of victims. The vicar has been asked to have the tree cut down, but so far he has refused. He has pointed out that the tree is a useful source of income, as tourists have been coming from all parts of the country to see it. In spite of all that has been said, the tourists have been picking leaves and cutting their names on the tree trunk. So far, not one of them has been struck down by sudden death. Lesson 59. In or out? Our dog, Rex, used to sit outside our front gate and bark. Every time he wanted to come into the garden, he would bark until someone opened the gate. As the neighbors complained of the noise, my husband spent weeks training him to press his paw on the latch to let himself in. Rex soon became an expert at opening the gate. However, when I was going out shopping last week, I noticed him in the garden near the gate. This time he was barking so that someone would let him out. Since then, he has developed another bad habit. As soon as he opens the gate from the outside, he comes into the garden and waits until the gate shuts. Then he sits and barks until someone lets him out. After this, he immediately lets himself in and begins barking again. Yesterday, my husband removed the gate and Rex got so annoyed we have not seen him since. Lesson 60. The future. At a village fair, I decided to visit a fortune teller called Madame Belinsky. I went into her tent and she told me to sit down. After I had given her some money, she looked into a crystal ball and said, "A relation of yours is coming to see you. She will be arriving this evening and intends to stay for a few days. The moment you leave this tent, you will get a big surprise. A woman you know well will rush towards you. She will speak to you and then she will lead you away from this place. That is all." As soon as I went outside, I forgot all about Madame Belinsky because my wife hurried towards me. "Where have you been hiding?" she asked impatiently. "Your sister will be here in less than an hour, and we must be at the station to meet her. We are late already." As she walked away, I followed her out of the fair. Lesson 61. Trouble with the Hubble. The Hubble telescope was launched into space by NASA on April 20th, 1990, at a cost of over $1 billion. Right from the start, there was trouble with the Hubble. The pictures it sent us were very disappointing because its main mirror was faulty. NASA is now going to put the telescope right, so it will soon be sending up 4 astronauts to repair it. The shuttle Endeavour will be taking the astronauts to the Hubble. A robot arm from the Endeavour will grab the telescope and hold it while the astronauts make the necessary repairs. Of course, the Hubble is above the Earth's atmosphere, so it will soon be sending us the clearest pictures of the stars and distant galaxies that we have ever seen. The Hubble will tell us a great deal about the age and size of the universe. By the time you read this, the Hubble's eagle eye will have sent us thousands and thousands of wonderful pictures. Lesson 62. After the fire. Firemen had been fighting the forest fire for nearly 3 weeks before they could get it under control. A short time before, great trees had covered the countryside for miles around. Now, smoke still rose up from the warm ground over the desolate hills. Winter was coming on, and the hills threatened the surrounding villages with destruction. For heavy rain would not only wash away the soil, but would cause serious floods as well. When the fire had at last been put out, the forest authorities ordered several tons of a special type of grass seed which would grow quickly. The seed was sprayed over the ground in huge quantities by airplanes. The planes had been planting seed for nearly a month when it began to rain. By then, however, in many places the grass had already taken root. In place of the great trees which had been growing there for centuries, patches of green had begun to appear in the blackened soil.